All right, so I had a little bit of difficulty figuring out exactly the depth to get the case bushing or the rear bushing installed on my 4L60E. This is the first one I've done, but I've been able to look at two now. This is the one that I removed from this case, and then I have a second case that was no good. And let's see, this one, let me flip it over. This one, anyway, this case, the lugs are destroyed back here, but you can see the approximate depth there from the video, and that matched how the other one was as well. But all of the information basically says to install this approximately 1/8 of an inch from the inside edge. If you drive it in straight and then you look at the back side, it actually looks like that side is different than that side as far as depth. I think that's just inconsistency in the casting of the case, because when I flip it over, it actually looks fairly consistent. Focus. We can get her to focus. There we go. Looks pretty consistent all the way around. And there's the opposite side. But the information saying to put it a 1/2 inch low, I believe, is saying a 1/2 inch low from where the bearing rides on the front of the case there, and not a 1/2 inch low from the bevel. And a good way to look at this and check your work here is just get a small mirror. You can examine that edge really nicely. And you can measure from the other side with a depth gauge or caliper, whatever you like. But I think in this scenario, the best thing to do is just use your eyeballs and make sure that it is uniform from the inside edge of the case with the bearing surface for that rear hub for the planetary. And I'll stick that in there and show that as well. All right, so there we are with that hub in there and the ring gear with the bearing installed on it, so it's at the correct depth here. And I'll put some pressure on it just so it's absolutely in the right spot. There you go. And you can see that that's like perfect engagement. You know, the bushing is right on the flat part of the shaft and not overhanging, which is, you know, just where we want it. And that's the test I would do if you're not sure. Again, I guess it's personal preference, kind of whether you install this from the front or the rear of the case. But if you go from the rear and you try and gauge it off of this dimension, you know, how far down this is on either side, then you may end up crooked. And I think that's what happened on the one I pulled out here. I had to clean this up because it was cocked. So you can do that, but you're going to want to either check it from the other side or with the mirror. If you do it from the inside, which is the way I did it, and I think that's the way I would prefer to do it, even though it seems more difficult, then you can use the case. If you stand over it, and you can use that to center it. Just line it up in the middle. Doesn't seem very scientific, but I think our eyeballs are oftentimes a lot more accurate than we think. You can put clutches in, line them up without an alignment tool that way, and I've never had it not line up. This driver set is from Amazon. There's a ton of different kits with different brand names, different color cases. They're all the same. And this is what I'm using. I didn't get the specific ones. That was $50 versus $100 for the GM specific tools. And then I took the shaft, got a socket around it, wrapped some paper towels around it to make it tight so it wasn't wobbling all over the place. And that put me just above the case to get this with a hammer. And then I think the last little thing would be, couldn't really find any information on these notches having to be oriented a certain way, other than they have to be facing towards the front of the transmission. But as far as clockways, apparently does not matter. The seam of the bushing there's no spec on it. Watched a video where one guy said he would put that towards 12 o'clock, which makes sense to me, just because there would be less potential for weight to be sitting on it, although I don't know which way the shaft ends up getting pushed when everything's in motion. But it seemed logical, so that's what I did. And that's it. All right, I'm recording this on my phone, so I had to make a quick correction. I just rewatched, I'm uploading it from my phone, but I just rewatched the video, and I said that the bushing should be approximately a half inch below this surface where the Torrington bearing on the back of that hub that attaches to the ring gear. I said it should be about a half inch below. It should be about 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. And that was per the Cliff McCormick Atra guide, the book. And I believe it said the same thing in the other 4L60 manual I have, which is ATSG, a couple other places as well. So the clarification I was making was that it should be about 1/8 inch below this flat surface here where that bearing rides, and that's because that will put it right below that beveled edge. Just want to make sure I'm being clear here. Right below that beveled edge, and put it in the correct location to have full engagement with the shaft on the back of that hub. Let's see, there was one other thing I did want to add, and that is when I punched this out, I used, since I'm using a universal kit, not the correct set, correct, but you know what I mean. I used one size smaller than what I thought was correct to make sure that I didn't end up bound up in the case when I was punching it out. And then before I went to drive the new one in, I selected the tightest fitting one that would fit, tightest fitting one in the back of the case, to make sure that I had good engagement on the edge of this bushing. I read several things saying that you should always press these in to avoid damage, which probably is the best thing to do. However, I did not see any damage on the one I just drove in, and this edge is beveled on both sides or both directions. Let me see if I can get a good picture of that. Try. May not be able to. Now you can kind of see how it's beveled this way and it's beveled this way. So even when you're smacking this with this flat driver, even if it did spread the end of this, which it may be worse on a brass bushing, I believe this is a Babbitt bushing, which I'm not sure what Babbitt is. This is magnetic, but even if it did spread that a little bit, which I don't, there's visually, without getting a magnifying glass, I don't see any evidence of that. It'd still be okay. Still check it once it's installed, but it'd be pretty hard to get that set up in a press. And then also this driver set, to make the screw work on here, you have to stack two of these. So I selected the one that fit just inside of this bushing, just as a little extra security, and that worked out really good for me. Just stop and check what you're doing as you're doing it once you get started. Don't get it started crooked. All right, thanks for watching.